All right. Hey, Neil, it's exciting to sit with you. So we were kind of going to have a conversation about using AI for knowledge-based content. And then we thought we should probably record this conversation because people have a lot of questions. So I'm glad you're here. Are you ready to?
Yeah. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. Always excited to talk more about knowledge-based content and how you can use AI to optimize processes. So would love to chat more and share what I know.
Awesome. Yeah, I felt like this was such a great opportunity to talk about the practical application of AI. So we'll start just with this question around what are the right types of content to use AI for versus not using AI for, right? So you're specifically in the help article world. What makes help articles such a great fit for using AI?
Yeah, absolutely. So AI works really well when you can give it a set of instructions, and if you can tell it exact guidelines that it needs to follow, then it works brilliantly. And there's so many examples where it has worked so well. So help articles or knowledge-based content is one of those content pieces wherein once you have the initial context that is required, the next set of things that you do, which is writing, typing out the article, or actually rephrasing it in a way that you follow Microsoft style guiding or any other style guiding that you follow, your brand voice and all of that. So all of these are structured guidelines that are there, and everyone is trying to follow the same guidelines. And now that you have it structured anyways, you can give the same instructions to AI, and AI would be able to do a brilliant job with it. And similarly, and for knowledge-based content, you also take a lot of screenshots and whatnot, right? And then even that is a very manual process here. And but if you give the right input along with the context, it'll be able to do that all automatically as well. And that's where I believe AI could be really helpful. There are not now it depends on there's so many different ways you could use it. You could probably some folks just use it to rewrite the given article that they have. Some folks use it to generate the idea for the article itself. Some folks use it to sort of add screenshots as well and all of that. So it depends on what percentage of AI you want to use, and what part of workflow do you want to improve. But it can definitely make the processes much more efficient. And yeah, so that's very much it.
Awesome. My cat is about to make an introduction to the video, but I know we were talking kind of before we started recording, and I made the like, oh, and he's just gonna do that. That's my cat. Yeah, of
Awesome.
the book range and kind of talking about there are certain things where having if it's more like of an established process, and you were saying help articles are like that, where it is a little bit step by step, it is pretty like specific, and so you can give it
Yeah.
those instructions or you can give it access to your application, and it's pretty straightforward compared to maybe more creative endeavors or things where maybe we have more human involvement. So let's talk about that in terms of like human involvement. How are humans involved in the process of using AI, specifically in this context for knowledge-based article creation?
Absolutely. So as we discussed, knowledge-based content creation is a very structured form of content creation where you follow same set of guidelines in brand voice. But for an AI to follow all those, you still need an input as well, right? AI does not know anything about your product, or the product for which you're creating an article for. That it knows generic things and guidelines that it can follow. But the initial set of context is something that you still need to give to AI. And that's what is required. That's where human involvement is required, wherein you give the all the initial input that's required, and it will follow all the processes and guidelines for you to give you the first draft of it. And then again after that, to review it and perform the final edits, you still need a human in the loop. And that's where you will need humans, because you want to ensure that it does not hallucinate, and if there's not enough context given, because it does not know anything about your product. And knowledge based content is typically for your product, to show your customers how to use your product and educate them on different features that you have. And AI is not aware of your product in general. It does not have any context about that. So the initial context that is required to generate the knowledge based article is always something that you need to give to it. And then that's where humans would spend most of the time in this workflow. And then the rest of it, once you have this initial context, AI can rewrite it and generate the article for you. And then after that, you can do the final reviewing and then publish it as well.
I'm glad you said hallucinate, because that was a word that someone had used. That was one of the questions they asked. How do you keep it, how much time is a human spending reviewing? So humans are involved, we're feeding AI information, right? Because it doesn't
Yeah,
know, right? It doesn't know about our
absolutely.
unless we tell it. We're maybe feeding it guidelines. You mentioned Microsoft guidelines. We're feeding it brand voice info. So we're giving it the input to get quality output, and then we're reviewing the output for coherence and accuracy. How much time does that save people, right? So we're maybe spending some time up front feeding AI with that information. We're spending some time reviewing, but what's the average time savings? Because there's still a human involved. Yeah, what have you found kind
Absolutely.
of the average time savings in that?
Yeah, so I think building the workflow is really important, right? So the initial part of training the AI on how to rewrite the content or giving it those guidelines to follow or your brand voice as well. It's not something that you do every time you create an article. It's just a one-time thing that you need to do. And then the way it works is you give it some set of examples. This is the input, and here's what I want the output to look like. And you give a couple of examples like that, and then you give it specific guidelines that it needs to follow. In case of, let's say, Microsoft style guiding, you would say something like start with an action verb. Always keep your sentences short and simple and very easy to understand by anyone. And then you give all of these sort of, and keep your language in active voice always in your knowledge base article. So you give all these guidelines, and these are anyways one time thing. Even the brand voice training is just a one time thing and not something that you need to repeat again and again. And that's where again tooling also comes into the picture, because if you're using something like just chat gpt, it does not have all the context. You need to, every time you need to create an article, you will have to create a new chat and then send all these details again and train it again with the examples. But then one alternative to that is actually creating your own custom gpt, wherein you've trained it to work on something and you can always go back to it and then it'll do that. Or another alternative could be integrating something into your workflow completely. And that's exactly what we are doing at Clueso, because what we have realized is typically anyone and everyone knows how to explain their product to someone else. So let's say, as a person who's working on this product, if I were to explain this to someone else, I'd be able to explain this to them very, very well if they're sitting right next to me or over a call. But if I were to write the same documentation, an article, knowledge base article for the same feature, or create a video for that, it's a very time consuming process, and not everyone can do it. And that's what we are trying to solve for, which is, the way we sort of built it is basically you give in a raw input of what the feature is. You explain the feature as if you're explaining it to your team member, and do the screen recording, very raw screen recording. And from that, we have a feature called AI Enhance. What it does is it takes the initial text, it gets all the context that is required, and then it follows all those guidelines for you. So we have just trained it once based on your brand voice and all the guidelines that need to be followed, and it follows that every time you give in a video input, and then all of that is automatically generated. It also, so one more thing that we've also done is another important part in knowledge base is actually getting the screenshots, because you want to keep your content very visual, otherwise it's not going to be engaging enough for your customers. And that's also something that our AI generates automatically. So we have prompted it in a way that it sort of automatically generates all these screenshots as well. I can see that your cat has been you've just been trying to
It is the witching hour over here. Um, okay, sorry, continue.
Yeah. So basically anywhere where, so we take in the raw input and get all the context, and our AI does all the job. It writes the article by following all the guidelines, brand voice. It generates the screenshots automatically, and that's also based on the script. So when you're talking in an original video and recording something, you say click here or click here. So it understands that this is an important aspect. It grabs a screenshot for that, automatically generates a GIF out of it. So that's on the article side. And we do similar things on the video side as well, adding zoom effects wherever relevant, enhancing the script and all of that. So I'd say, once you have the context, there's no hallucination. So that's why, giving the context is really important. And and then the way you train the AI itself is also really important. You want to, ensure that it does not do it. And sometimes you actually need to tell it, you are a tech. So one thing that we've done, in one of the prompts that we've written is, if you don't follow this guideline, I'll lose my job. So please ensure that you follow it. And then, because it's so strong, the wording, it will ensure that it does not hallucinate in that case. So there are, different ways around it to ensure that it does not hallucinate. And in terms of how much time it saves, it could vary from, in fact, for just to give an example of our customer base, we've been working with 150 plus companies. And for a few companies, it has been on the lowest side, it has been 60% time saving. And on the highest side, it's been close to 98% time saving, which is, almost 50 times faster their current workflow. And yeah, so it could vary a lot depending on which part of workflow are you solving with AI, and based on what your current workflow looks like as well. But it can definitely speed up the process by at least 2 times, by at least 2x. Yeah.
Sure. And I have to imagine it's like any form of delegation, right? There's more work up front because you're training it, but then over time it has that context, it has the brand voice guidelines, it has your writing guidelines, and it's learning the same way that an employee would, right? So I know I've heard before, think of AI as a new employee on your team, and you're training it and you're giving it time to ramp up like anyone else. But again, like quality input creates quality output. And you kind of answered another one of the questions that I had for you around, could you create a custom GPT model, or do you use a tool like Clueso? And it sounds like there's pros and cons of each, right? And
Yeah,
and so maybe it's just figuring out like what does a team need at this point, but there is, significant time
absolutely.
savings to be gained.
Right.
Okay.
So
Oh,
yeah, just one point to add there in terms of custom GPT, creating a custom GPT versus using a tool. So when you're creating a custom GPT, it's based on it could only solve one part of the workflow. But when you're going with a tool, not just Clueso or any similar tool as well, the reason is the thing is we've been working with so many similar companies, so we know exactly what the problems are in terms of knowledge base creation and video creation as well. And our literal goal is always to keep improving these models and keep improving the model for these workflows that we have, and keep improving that pipeline. So if you're building a custom GPT, it obviously involves constant maintenance from your end as well. And if you're doing it internally, and that's just for one of the workflows, and you have to do it for each of the different pieces. But with a tool, you can streamline this entire thing depending on what kind of tools you use. And that's where the difference comes in. Of course, the tool, there's a cost to it, but then it can also make things much faster. Yeah.
okay. That makes sense. So then that actually kind of goes on my next question is the AI just replacing certain steps in the usual process, which it sounds like maybe with a GPT flow it is, or maybe with a dedicated AI tool that was like purpose built for something, it might replace a few steps, or does it require a different mindset? So I think what people are thinking is, how do we think differently when we're using AI, right? Can we think of it like an extended member of our team and we're training them like we would anybody else? Does it require a different mindset? What sets people up for success when they're actually adopting AI?
Absolutely, absolutely. And because we're talking about this use case in particular, knowledge-based articles creation or videos creation, I definitely don't think AI can replace anyone here. It's just going to be part of your job, and it's just another tool that you can use to streamline your process and make it much, much faster. So you could be doing the same job that you're doing 10 times faster in terms of knowledge-based creation. But whoever is creating the knowledge base, they have so many other things to do as well, which AI can't solve for. So you can spend more time on those and less time on this, but it still requires a human involvement as well. As I mentioned, to be able to generate the knowledge based articles or videos, you still need to give that initial context or the screens of the video, your product itself, or the initial context of what the feature is about, how it works as well. Of course, the AI will do the job of rewriting it, generating a much more professional version of step by step guide out of it, or a professional video with really good voiceover and all of that. But the initial context is still required, and even the final part of it, once it is generated the content, to vet the content to ensure that customers don't engage with something that's not true, or you want to ensure that you also vet the content once. So that's where human involvement comes in. And of course, especially in this context, which is knowledge based articles creation, they're always going, so AI will still generate, let's say in our case, include with Clueso, AI automatically writes the script for you, generates the screenshots for your article as well. But you still need to go and add annotations on your screenshots wherever required. We automatically just highlight the one button, but there's always more information that you might want to give, or some alert or note that you might want to add, and all of that would still require human involvement. Similarly, in terms of videos, you still want to add your branding to your videos. You want to ensure that you want to vet the script once, and then generate the voiceover, ensure audio and video syncs perfectly. So there are always going to be parts where AI, human involvement is still there, and that's how we are thinking about it as well. So just think of it like whatever you're doing, and spending 10 hours on before to create a video and an article for one feature, for example, with a
Mhm.
tool like Clueso or any other AI tool, you could be doing it in less than 30 minutes. So it just speeds up the entire process for you, and you can be pushing out or publishing much more content than you're doing right now, because of how fast it's making your process.
That makes sense. I'm like thinking in my own head about creating even short videos where it is kind of easy to think through, okay, go here and do this and do this. But then when you go to create the screen share, you've got load time, you've got weird little
Absolutely.
things, whatever your internet glitches, and how much time we spend maybe recording a voiceover, recording the screen shares, piecing them
Syncing
together.
them together.
That's
Yeah,
always my least favorite part. Or if you're like, all right, we're gonna do it one fell swoop. I'm just gonna press record and screen share, and then you just end up with a thing and you have filler words. And I know, AI can kind of
yeah.
edit some of that out for you.
So
Yeah.
yeah, just to give you an example, like, if you have a video or input into Clueso, so the way it works is, you just give a raw screen recording of, you just screen sharing and talking through it. You can have any number of filler words, any number of anything back in the background. That doesn't matter. Tool like this would automatically take the script, enhance your script, rewrite it in a really nice way. It will add a professional voiceover as well, because that's something that a lot of people are using. And AI voiceovers are getting much better. They sound so natural these days that sometimes you can't even tell if it's an AI voiceover or a human speaking. And because of how clear they are, it automatically adds voiceovers, syncs your audio and video, which is again something that takes up a lot of time. All of these things have set guidelines, and all of these can be improved with AI or done directly automated with AI.
That makes sense. So let's talk about maybe some of the concerns that people have with
Yeah.
using AI. Big one has been, how do you decide what to share and what not with an AI system? So companies have intellectual property, confidential things. Obviously, we're trying to remove PII from everything. How do you kind of program a tool and ensure the safety and security of your intellectual property?
Absolutely. So, before using any AI tool, I think one thing I definitely suggest is go through their guidelines in the terms of service as well. So, in terms of ChatGPT is something, that you're using, and then everything that you send there is also being used to train, the models again. But then if you're using OpenAI APIs, which is, their enterprise APIs, then none of it is used in, training, or none of it is stored on their cloud as well. So you want to be careful about which aspect of it are you using. And then there are a lot of these AI tools, or even AI APIs, Open AI and all of these other LLMs that are there. Most of these APIs have enterprise plans, which means like if you're using their enterprise plan or the standard API that you use, if you use their standard API, it does not use any of the data that you send to train the models, or store it on their cloud as well. So you can use any of these, but then there are always these public models as well, or something like ChatGPT, because it's something that a lot of consumers are interacting with, and then it's just very cheap and free as well. They're always going to use that data to train the models as well. So one best way to go about it is just going through the guidelines and terms of service, and going through them and ensuring that none of it is being used to train the data. And yeah, and one more thing is just vetting the content before you even send to any of these AI models, just ensuring that you are not sending anything to let's say confidential to any of these models.
Okay. And to clarify, it may not be, trying to think of how I word this, right? So we're talking about large language learning models, and it may not be the company that has an AI tool that has the language learning model, because they could be leveraging something like OpenAI or Bard or something like that, right?
Yeah.
So we want to know, like, what are they using? And then also, how is that maybe using my data? Is that right?
Absolutely. So what you need to do is, whatever tool you're using, how are they using the data is what you need to check. And if all of these tools, it does not, like OpenAI has ChatGPT, and they have enterprise standard APIs as well. Through their enterprise standard APIs, they don't use any of your data to train their models. But to ChatGPT, they use the data that you send there. So you want to be careful about which of their services you're using as well, even within a given vendor. And then all of those are so basically, it's not just your internal tools. You need to choose, you need to see, even if you have an internal tool that is using some other external APIs, let's say at Clueso, we use, OpenAI enterprise API. And, with that, we ensure that, any data that is being, any data that you have of your product that's going to OpenAI is not stored there, or they're not using it to train their models again. So again,
Mhm.
it all boils down to, what is the end product that you're using, and
Mhm.
does it use or does it use the data to train the next set of models? Yeah.
And I have to imagine people's legal and security teams are definitely all over this. So we probably
Oh,
don't know the ins and outs. They're going to ask the right questions. Okay. How do you ensure that AI created content matches your brand voice style and lexicon, right? Uses the verbiage that we use and kind of the format of things. You just give it a brand voice guideline doc. Do you feed it a bunch of different content that you've already created? All of the
Yeah.
above?
So I'd say yes. So you definitely need to give it all the guidelines that need to be followed, and you should be as descriptive as possible in terms of, here's exactly what you need to do. And always with a prompt, when you're giving the guidelines, it always helps to add examples along with it as well, because that just helps it understand better. So the way we prompt it at Clueso, let's say to rewrite your knowledge base article or things like that, is we have a prompt that says, okay, no, think of it like, you are a technical writer. You are a technical writer and you're working at this company called XYZ. And your job is now to, write the documentation on how each of these features on this product work. What I'm going to give you as an input is, a overall broad, future overview. And what you need to generate from it is a, knowledge base article. And here are the guidelines that you need to follow. Create it in a step-by-step format. Ensure that every step has a screenshot. Ensure that you're starting with an action verb, keeping the voice in active voice. And if you have specific brand guidelines, just ensure that you'd never use this word or you use this word. So being as straightforward as possible and giving it exact instructions to follow, that really helps. Try to avoid any kind of ambiguity anywhere. And then on top of this, just giving examples also just really helps and makes it much better. And obviously there are going to be times when it's not giving the output as required, but that's something that always happens. There are going to be sometimes, very rarely, the result might be a little random, and it probably does not follow a few guidelines, and then that's when you want to generate the results again, and it would probably work well in the next time. And another thing that you could also do is, as I mentioned, few tricks that we have found out internally, while we have been prompting AI models again and again and improving our models, is sometimes you just got to be creative with it, saying that okay, don't do this. If you do this, I'm going to lose my job. So, please be careful. This is about my life or something like that. And, when it's so strongly worded, the models, behave better. And then, one more thing that also keeps changing is the way the model works. Let's say right now, we've got GPT-4, and then, like as soon as there's some GPT-4 turbo, the way, GPT-4 works, or the way the model works also keep changing. So the result, you also need to, always keep a track of what your prompt is, and keep improving them again and again. It's not like you just write it once and then it keeps improving. Whenever there's a new update that's coming from OpenAI, because the model weights are changing, the model is changing a bit, you need to go and prompt it again, or give it accordingly, maybe change a few things so that it works with the latest version of the model as well. So it does require some maintenance, and examples really help along with the guidelines to make it perform it the way you want it to perform. And yeah.
Okay, so I'm hearing two things. One is we should have those guidelines, and we should have those guidelines anyway, right? If this is how we format articles, right?
Absolutely.
Because I think about how often you see inconsistencies of doesn't follow the same format, doesn't all have screenshots. This one has a video and this one's just written text, and right, they don't always follow the same format. And then also, I think you're making a case again for the human component. This isn't a set it and forget it type thing. AI is replacing you, right? I think we keep hearing that AI is coming for our jobs, but the reality is
Yeah.
humans are, feeding the AI and helping to ensure accuracy and update the prompts according to how the model changes. So I think that makes a case for us continuing to work, but kind of working alongside AI. It's augmenting our work.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm going through the rest of the questions. I think I have two questions that we haven't gotten to yet. So one of the things that AI can be really good for in a knowledge base is helping to create those content articles. I don't know if you have any best practices on identifying gaps in your knowledge base articles and then prioritizing the work to be done, right? So obviously AI can help us get more of that work done faster, which is great, right? So
Yep.
not that we don't still need to prioritize, but maybe we're actually able to accomplish a bit more. And someone had said, can we use AI to diagnose needs based on support tickets by product area, which I thought was really cool. Like, what a great application also for AI to sift through all of this information that's coming in to identify, okay, what questions are people asking? Where are their gaps? How do we then use that to build AI generated content?
Absolutely. So that's a great question. So there are a few categories wherein you can understand, how you can improve your knowledge base. So one is based on the things that your users are searching for in the search bar of your knowledge base. Sometimes they're searching for things, but they're not able to find what they're searching for, or after they search for something, the results did not really appear. So you can keep track of the things that they're searching for. So that's one way, and then you can use the AI, use AI to categorize those, which is a very simple job, categorizing all the different search results into different kinds of feature requests, or maybe the kind of features for which there's no documentation, or people are still not finding something that's helpful. So that's one way. Second way is obviously, which makes a lot of sense, is support tickets. There are a lot of support tickets coming in always from customers, and just analyzing those support tickets and understanding what are different kinds of questions that are coming in. And they could be bug requests, of course, and then that helps you understand what are the major bugs that are there in the product, and you can improve those. But more on the side of knowledge base, there will always be requests on how do I still do this, or how do I do this, how do I do this. And then if there are questions coming in about a few topics again and again, so it could be one of the two things, which is your current, if you even have the content right now, it's probably not effective enough, and probably it's out of date, and your customers are not getting value out of it, and they're still not understanding how to use that feature. Or it could be the case that you still don't have it documented as well. So just analyzing all the queries that are coming in itself and categorizing them into different types of features, or different categories of tickets as well, would just help you understand what are you lacking in your knowledge base. Is it that the content is out of date, or is it still not clear enough? Maybe you should add more visuals, or is it just that there's no content at all for this topic? So that would really help as well. And apart from that, I think just sometimes having multi-format content also really helps in terms of knowledge base. And then one thing personally that we have seen is a lot of people prefer going through videos over articles. And then it also depends on the kind of topic that you're talking about. If it's something more conceptual or something that requires a lot more detail, people prefer going through videos. And then if it's something that's very quick, they just like to skim through the articles and figuring out where to click from the screenshots itself. So all of these different aspects, you could understand based on the tickets coming, the search results. You can analyze all of these with AI, and figure out what's lacking, and you could build on top of those things.
That's totally why we were decided to record, right? Because I was gonna write something and thought, okay, some of this is nuance, and people might they wanna listen through the nuanced conversation.
Absolutely.
I wanted to like offer this in addition. So that makes sense. We're looking at what are people searching for, which is great, right? Not just which help articles are people looking at. We're not just looking at the thumbs up, thumbs down. We're also looking at their queries. Are they then clicking on anything to understand? Are we meeting the need? Or are we not?
Exactly.
I was thinking,
And the support tickets. And one more thing I forgot to mention is, all of these knowledge base have this thumbs up, thumbs down. But
Mhm.
when you do choose one of these emojis, most of them also show a text box wherein user can enter an actual feedback of what did they not like about it, or what did they like about it. So
Mhm.
even analyzing the feedback points that are coming in through those feedback piece at the end of each of these articles, that would also help you understand what's working well and what's not, and that helps you understand how to go about your next set of articles and videos.
Okay, I like that. And you also mentioned content being out of date, which I know different people kind of manage their content differently. I'm going to put it out there for knowledge-based products, like maybe give us
Yeah,
the option to say that our product makes releases monthly, quarterly, and to ask us if things are out of date or flag them or something. Because sometimes you just don't know, right? Like if you didn't catalog all of your support content, which a lot of people do, you start building
yeah,
it, your knowledge base is getting built out. This article is kind of lost in the shuffle, and then you forget
absolutely.
that it's not up to date. Okay, last question is around okay, learning how to approach prompt engineering, what tools we can use to do this well. So this was basically how can we collaborate with maybe an internal support team with AI to create good help center content with limited customer education resources. I think we've covered some of this, but any final thoughts on prompt engineering, on maybe what we tend to forget? You mentioned being really specific, giving it specific
Yeah.
guidelines, giving it feedback, making sure we're giving it all of that context. Anything that we kind of tend to forget about like engineering a prompt, or anything else on like collaborating with AI, thinking about it in that context?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in terms of prompt engineering, to be very honest, there's so many resources coming out there these days, and some of the best resources, best things to follow, as I mentioned, try to be as specific as possible. Give it specific guidelines, exactly what to do and what not to do as well. So sometimes what everyone ends up doing is try to do this, which is great, but then you also need to give it guidelines on what not to do, because if there's something, let's say some I use let's say ChatGPT to rewrite my LinkedIn post as well sometimes, and I'm giving it a post because I'm just dumping my ideas in, and I'm like, okay, how do I rewrite this in a better way? But then now the challenge is that ChatGPT in general tries to use a lot of marketing language and a lot of adjectives everywhere, and then you got to say, like, don't use adjectives, like try just take this and then try to keep the language simple while making it easier to understand, and also keep it very simple and informal, something like that. So you got to give it things that it should not do as well, which is something that a lot of people forget. Another very important thing is actually giving it some examples of what the input looks like, and what the output should be like. That really helps. So actually giving, so when you're giving a prompt and then you say something like please look at the following examples to understand what should the output look like, and you actually put those in quotation marks or in curly brackets, or you can follow any kind of sort of workflow that any kind of, I'd say, template that you want, but you still need to give it some examples as well, and that really helps the prompt understand your input better, and give a better output as well. And apart from that, I would say it's just practicing makes it better, makes you better at it. Like just running multiple different prompts, that's again something that you need to do to understand what works well and what does not. And one more important thing is the way you prompt also needs to change with the kind of models that you use, because the way different models are built on, the kind of data that they're built on, or they're very different. So the way you prompt it also needs to change when you change the model. And that's why I say even the maintenance part is really important, because whenever there's a new model upgrade or something, or let's say what's the same prompt that you use for GPT-3 will not work for GPT-4 in the exact same way. You probably still want to make some tweaks as well, and that's something that's really important as well. So I'd say all of these things, and it's just part of practice. And in terms of collaboration, you should definitely collaborate with support team in terms of knowledge based content, just to understand what's happening with customers, like what's the overall sort of what is the overall what are they saying normally? Are they happy with it? Not just analyzing support tickets, but actually getting that qualitative feedback also really helps. Are they frustrated at content, or are they not finding the content? Is it out of date? And just talking to support team members directly, or even if the support calls are being recorded, or in the conversations are being recorded, just going through those also really helps, even manually, because then that's when you exactly know what's happening, because something that's being conveyed to support team could be conveyed in a different way to you as well, and that's where a lot of things get missed as well. So actually going through the actual transcripts of the calls or the conversations or email threads also really help.
Okay, so I'm hearing be specific, tell it what to do, also what not to do, which I totally
Exactly.
hear you. I have to say, okay, don't make it longer than this, max character count.
Yeah.
Please don't use emojis and 75 exclamation points, because it seems to kind of want to give you like I call it like a chat GPT, response.
Yeah, exactly.
Call it that. And then we're giving it examples. And we are maybe using
Maintaining
some
it.
strong language to be like,
Yeah.
hey, this is really important. Job is on the line. If you screw this up, I definitely won't have a job at the end of
Yeah.
the week. And then we're collaborating with our support team to understand how they communicate things, because I think that's interesting too. Sometimes there's, you create something based on what product has told you, but then support is teaching a workaround that nobody else knows because that didn't work. But if we're not communicating, then we don't know that, right? So
Absolutely.
we're looking at that and how they're talking. So, and then maybe close on this of you mentioned twice now different LLMs, right? And different models, and how you have to change your prompt. How do you know that the model has changed and what to change about your prompt?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And the how do you know the model has changed? That's something that you can stay updated with a lot of news coming in, and whenever OpenAI launches anything, there's news everywhere. So you will definitely know that something, the model has changed. And now, how do you go about changing it? Sometimes it requires very small tweaks itself, and sometimes it requires large tweaks as well. So the best way to go about it is, let's say, once the model is changed, once you realize that the model has changed, run it through the same content, to the same examples that you had run it through before, or the same content pieces that you had run it through before, and try to compare the results. And when you're comparing the old results versus the new results, you will see if there's some differences. You will know what to tweak in the existing prompt, so that because this model has started doing it, which it wasn't doing before, and now I want to tell it to not do it, or maybe not do it differently as well. So just comparing the old results with the new results is really helpful in that case, and that would help you understand what to change in the prompt.
Okay, good to know. Good, I did not know that, so I just learned that. Cool, awesome. Well,
and these are all the things that we keep learning as well. I mean, as part of our product building, and of course, my CTO and our tech team would know these much better than me as well. I'm always talking to customers and doing sales calls and customer success, but because they're already always working on models and improving these prompts, they would have better insights as well. So all these things you just keep learning as you go. Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, that I think is kind of the mantra. Keep learning. Let's, because technology is changing. We have to keep learning for our jobs. But this has been great. Thank you for taking the time to answer all of our most pressing questions on AI for Knowledge Base. Looking forward to seeing, sharing this video and then also seeing what else comes out from Clueso. So thanks for your time, Neel.
Of course, and it's always super fun chatting with you, and in general, to the customer education community, and talking more about videos and documentation. That's something that I'm always working on and thinking about and talking about. So it's always fun to learn more, and always share what I know. So yeah, thanks for having me, and this is super fun.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.